Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, David Bloom. Up next, TMT with Daniel Frankel and a guest, a special guest, Brian Ring. He's joining us fresh off of the Parks and Associates Future of TV conference that was held down the road here in Marina del Rey for 3 days this week. Both Dan and Brian were there. We're going to talk a lot about that, the beauty of bundles, how much more time we need to find things worth watching on TV, and YouTube's inevitable role as the backstop when you can't find something to watch. All this and more from the 3-day data fest that was the Future of TV conference. The bids are in for purchase of a storied Hollywood studio. Though Laura Martin, the analyst we quite adore, thinks the fix is already in. Is she right? Dan's curious and abiding affection for a failed Friends spinoff from 2 decades ago, and it's not even called The Affair with Joey. We'll be talking as well, speaking of failed, as we enter the holiday blockbuster season. This year's domestic theatrical box office continues to look weak. Also weak, only 3 major internet service providers, Starlink, Verizon, and T-Mobile, are reporting growth. Is it time to auction off that broadcast spectrum to Elon and others who might know what to do with it? Speaking of knowing what to do, niche subscription streaming service CuriosityStream is making bucks helping train AI large language models on its nature and science docs. How long before everyone else jumps on this gravy train? The White House feted the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, while lawyer David Hopp took a discomforting look at the many complications of that $55 billion Saudi purchase of Electronic Arts and what it might mean for any other Saudi media deals here in the U.S. And Bill Maher has a pre-Thanksgiving message, which it's about peace, love, and crossing the aisle. Dan's conspiratorial dismissal of such inexplicably heartwarming suggestions will be the way we send you off to your own holiday celebrations. And we'll wrap with the Big Ten's bad week. People are watching the SEC, but not Dan's beloved USC and my beloved USC, or for that matter, Brian's beloved Cal Bears, who are not doing quite as well. Anyway, with that, we will get started. Daniel, what did you and Brian see at parks that really caught your ear? We had a lot of stuff in the newsletter about it, but it was all over the map after 3 days of conference jawboning. It's not a surprise, but what caught your ear most?
Well, first off, thank you for right off the bat for, without me even initiating it, paying homage to one of David Ellison's most prized asset, the Showtime series, The Affair. So kudos to you for that.
I just wanted to get that out there as soon as I could. You know, it's his prized asset indeed. He's probably watching multiple runs of that whole series, along with Joey.
I'll just say this. Parks Associates is an interesting business. It's a Dallas-based research company run by Elizabeth Parks. Her mom started the business in the 80s, and it's a nice story of a family business. It's a really compelling conference with great speakers, high-level folks like Laura Martin, like Scott Barton from Charter, and many others.
Brian, what did you see?
Yeah, no, thank you guys, both of you, for allowing me onto this podcast. I'm really thrilled, and I got a lot of different things to say. I do first have to point out my free quarterly research is futureoftv.live. This conference was the future of video. It's part future of video, and they've been doing it 8 years running, which I just find impressive. Just to be really inside details on conferences, they kept it in kind of one room, which I actually kind of like that model. It doesn't spread things out all over the place. So that was kind of cool. And then in terms of interesting things, I mean, we'll get into a few of them. I mean, the Laura Martin comment about how and why Paramount Skydance will end up with WBD was, as you say, Daniel, right? Like that was like, yeah, she's probably dead on there. I thought that was pretty.
He thinks it's greased, right? It's greased.
It seems like it could be to me, right? Like, doesn't it make sense to you guys? Is there another? Do you all remember Larry Ellison, like 10 feet away from Trump in the White House, like, I don't know, 8 months ago? So yeah, I think that's what it feels like to me.
And doing the deal for TikTok, that'll probably put that under his control as well. And he is the second richest man in the world. So there's that.
That was a precursor, she thought, to Team Ellison getting Paramount or Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then when you look at some of the other bidders like Netflix and I forget who else they were pointing out, there's only a few companies, Apple, I don't know. Yeah, it just starts to make sense. And, you know, I think pattern recognition, we've all been around forever. Like once you start hearing a drumbeat of some bankers and some things coming together, like where there's smoke, there does tend to be fire. So yeah, I do think that's coming. And I'll make a little bit of a pivot. I didn't expect to see Bill Maher discussed in the notes here. And I'll tell you guys something that nobody's talking about, which is super funny. And we'll talk more about this, but I cut the cord. I cut the cord. I quit YouTube TV after 9 years because of the ESPN dispute. I couldn't find any college football. And I had like a 3 or 4 or 5 hour discovery of like, what is this TV landscape looking like? Who has multi-view? Who has DVR? And I felt like it was all super interesting, but the really narrow point that I don't know if anyone realizes is in this process, I cut HBO. And something they've done that nobody knows, they're putting Bill Maher on CNN the next night, right? So when you're on the DVR and you're using Sling, like I cut HBO expecting like, oh, I'll add it in a week or two. Like I'm just trying to, be undizzied about like the amount of choices. And I'm finding like, yeah, I don't know. I might subscribe to HBO Max, but I've long said I pay that $15-16 fee basically for Bill Maher. It's an incredible TV habit. And so that's just kind of a funny, narrow thing of like, I can't believe that. Like the one programming move they moved, like, hey, let's take this premium thing and put it on the free channel. And here I am 15, 18 years later, like, I don't know if I need to subscribe. Like I can wait one more night to see it on CNN. No problem.
When it's under $20, you're talking about an SVOD, even a pricey one like HBO Max. I mean, it's a consequential decision for a lot of homes, but it's not $83 for premium virtual MVPD. I mean, YouTube TV is a lot of money.
Yeah. And let me say this, I'll kind of pivot on something else back to parks. Telly TV was there, Dallas Lawrence. And he said something that resonated with what this process that I had just gone through. Because after now I'm through that process, I'm like, it's amazing how little I wanted to even take a test drive in some of these other services. Like, Sling's pretty good. It's got some things that are better, some things that are worse. Like, hey, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty sure I'm saving a bunch of money, especially if I'm not subscribing to HBO Max. My whole mentality this time through was like, I'm going to just start with the basics. And like, as people in my family complain, like, then I'll start adding content, right? And this whole thing taught me something at the very end of the day that Dallas Lawrence on the stage really talked about, which is how deeply like addictive, I'll use as a word, like how deeply habitual the process is of TV, where you sit down and you use it this way and that's the way it is. And so, yeah, it just really interesting. He had made a comment about people really only want to sit back on the lounge and, it's kind of very Charlie Ergen-esque. And yeah, I just thought to myself, yeah, it's really, really sticky. I don't know if we
The
all
opposite
realize how sticky our
reaction to
TV
that.
packages are.
I thought there was some sort of old world assumptions about TV consumption. I think some of today's viewers, at least the younger set, is a little more tactile, a little more interactive in terms of how they consume it. But that's just my experience.
True. And there's that like kind of age old argument, but well, when you get older, but like if you think about a lifespan, I guess, and it's like sometime around 25 or 30, you start to get that formation, then you do 30 and then 40, it's family, and then 50. I mean, hopefully you live 50, 60, 70, you've got more and more money, right? And I think that's where I'll say this too. I think in general, this conference and Charter's comments, especially Charter, Scott Barton, I said this, David, you remember on my podcast earlier this year, I said pay TV hit a bottom. I made kind of a big joke about all the TV stuff. Then Moffat Nathanson said a similar thing. Now you have this extended battle between ESPN and YouTube, which I believe both parties are they're fighting each other, but like the fourth wall is out to the audience. Hey, you guys, you're paying more. I don't care what, like you don't like us fighting. We don't care. You're paying more, right?
So the bottom line literally is they're fighting about stuff that doesn't directly impact the viewer, except that they pay more, whatever it's going to be. Because a lot of those things are like who controls the data, who controls the information about the customer, with things like that are really important to Disney and Charter. But the customers like, I just want to pay my bill, get my TV.
Scott Barton presentation. Scott's an interesting guy. He's working for My Bundle, the Florida-based SAS solution provider. Works with small telecom and hooks them up with streaming companies.
They call it SaaS provider.
Thank you, David.
Just doing the tech thing.
So Scott's been working for Charter. He gave a really good overview of Spectrum Select, gives a dozen SVODs, the ad-supported versions at no extra cost to consumers. It's been reversing Charter's pay TV model for about 12 months now. We've covered it quite a bit here. But what he did show, one of the major themes I thought of the conference was the failure or struggles, if we want to use the more optimistic word, of search and recommendation. And because Charter works with Peacock, they work with Amazon Prime Video, they work with Disney ESPN, they have those apps natively, I think, ingested into their platform. Because they also work with MSG, the regional sports network. If you say, find my Knicks game into a Zumo remote, you go straight to a Knicks game, which is kind of a nifty feature. They're promoting it with a Tracy Morgan ad. We have it in the issue. It's with John Starks. It's really funny. But that's what it takes. You need relationships with everybody to make search work effectively. And at least with that particular team, they've done that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is actually
really
what
quickly,
Apple's trying to do too, though, right? So, I mean, Apple and Amazon, right? They want to be able to say not just what's on Apple TV, the app, the stream. Actually, let me just clarify what's on Apple TV, the streaming service, but what's on Apple TV, the streaming platform. That's what Amazon's trying to do, and Google's sort of trying to do, right? So you integrate all that, and Charter could do that. Zumo will make that possible, and I think that again gives them a chance to be relevant, right? They were fading, and then they did the fight with Disney 2 years ago. That got them back in the game with the streaming.
We're still losing pay TV customers. They were losing like 350,000 a year ago. Now they're losing like 70,000 in a quarter.
Right, it's down by 80%, but it's still a negative.
The
negative's a negative.
There were a couple interesting studies that were in the backdrop as we convened in the Marina Del Rey. One was Grace Note published a study that's saying it's taken 14 seconds on average for consumers.
Minutes.
Right, thank you. Which is up, not down, despite all this AI and all these supposed advances.
Yeah, it used to be like 8 minutes, right? Then that was deemed like unbearable, and is, but now it's almost double that. So it's like, wow.
And then Hub Entertainment Research had this interesting graphic showing that the survey-based, that folks turn to YouTube when they can't find something through normal search and recommendation means. And I tell you, using a Google TV powered set with YouTube TV, still paying for it, Brian. There is a really great 3-man game there. I mean, search and recommendation works in that way. I find all these UFC pregame review creator sites that I wouldn't normally visit. It just feeds me this steady smorgasbord of sugary, nutritionless programming that I didn't intend to watch, but I did, and fuck whatever I was going to watch on that SVOD. They're onto something there. Anyway, we know that.
I'll just add a little bit on that because I thought you're right. It was very striking to me. So this is the Charter gentleman, the My Bundle, formerly My Bundle guy, put up this idea of like, yeah, the Knicks are in 4 different apps. He put this great visual up, like it's in 4 different places. And then, as Daniel says, kind of laid out like a really great feature from the perspective of a speaker, right? What is it? Voice remote, right?
Voice activated remote.
Yeah. And I'll just say this because I've been in the business forever, and I've had this theory for a long, long time. The advertising agencies of the major paid TV providers are super smart. Just watch what they're doing. Sling lets you have it. Sling lets me do that. Boom, successful. Like, right? Charter, they get Tracy Morgan, like, find me the Knicks game. Like, if they have a clever commercial like that, I find that to be something to watch. Like, they're nailing it with that particular use case. And the last thing I'll say is that plays into their strength, is that they, as an aggregator, probably do have all the sports, whereas no one else is going to do that, right? Or presumably others are going to send you somewhere else.
Right. I do find it amazing to think that Tracy Morgan, bless his beloved soul, could find anything without serious AI assistance. This is a man who comes across as a little befuddled by existence in general. So
that it makes
he needs it.
It makes the commercial freaking brilliant.
Yeah,
really does.
Exactly. And John Starks, I might add, noted crazy man back in the day when he was with the Knicks. I mean, he was the guy. Yeah, he was the guy that the NBA used to talk about. It's like who would you never want to get into a fight with in the NBA? They ask the other player, they go, "Oh,
Oakley.
John Starks." Oakley, yes, but John Starks would start it, and Oakley would finish it, right? Because Oakley is 6'12" or something and 500 pounds.
You had Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon, one of the greatest rim protectors in the history of the game, standing there in Game 7 in '95, and his legs are shot from like fighting his way through this like fierce battle for Pat Riley, for 4 series and 7 games each, and he finally gets to the promised land. His legs aren't there, and he's got the announcer saying, "At some point in time, you got to stop shooting." He's stone cold. He bravely keeps hucking them up. They won't go in, but he's one of the most misunderstood NBA point guards of our time. I'll just say that.
Okay.
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I said this.
And I think he was on Joey for 7 episodes.
Say what you will, Netflix or somebody is going to smartly pick this up. It's going to be a hit, and you'll thank me.
I just want to know what the hit's going to look like, because 17,000 views on one episode in YouTube is something more than us, barely.
A building block,
but
just wait till the deals happen. Anyway, we'll get to
I do want to circle back to that bidding for Warner Brothers Discovery, because it is a big deal, and it will be 60-70 billion, literally a $60-70 billion deal, assuming that the Grease Laura Martin suggests is in, and it ends up in the Ellison's control. They'll have CBS News and CNN, because he wants everything. He wants all the cable operations. I don't know what he does with Turner, but I don't know what he does with Comedy Central or VH1. BET's got an audience, but who else does? So it might be worth pondering if it's indeed Grease. What do you guys think they do with all the cable operations that they'll have in hand, other than obviously HBO/HBO Max?
You're going to want to build a fast channel for the affair. That's probably the first order of
just
business.
For you. It'll be a small, seldom viewed channel otherwise, unless Joey is in having an affair with Ruth, what's her name? Ruth Wilson. If that were the case, they'd be all over.
Do you think they're going to look, Warner Brothers Discovery has been fairly aggressive in the last couple of years with rolling out fast channels, and due to the nature of their catalog and the strength and such, it kind of does look like a big, like a great business for especially at that kind of C-suite level. So I do think that's I think that I would suggest.
But that's globally too, right? I mean, it's important to note that they're not just doing it in the United States. They're doing fast channels. They're in 100 countries now, or aiming for 100 by the end of the year, I think, if I recall.
Yeah, and I mean, they've also got this Galazzo channel, which is soccer. Now then look at, UFC making a big bet towards the free ad-supported world as well. So, and then to your point, I mean, something was made a while back, maybe last month, about rejuvenating MTV and such and the cable brands. And I do kind of sense that, when something hasn't been touched, I mean, this is actually classic Hollywood. Like, we put it in the library and don't touch it for a while, and then we pour a bunch of money on it, and guess what? Like, stuff pops out. So, I don't think it's a bad plan to invest in. It's a risky plan, but that's the content business. So to pour a little, gasoline and fire on it, who knows? Maybe some old thing that was on MTV that none of us even remember, you know what I mean, breaks out again, and the guy
Headbangers Ball,
50 years old, and he's doing something else crazy. So it's not a bad plan, I guess, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we need another generation of behind the music. I just want to say, we totally need that, right?
David and I, you and I talked about this, sort of figure out new digital mechanisms to leverage those MTV brands. And the week after that, Jeff Shell kind of said just that. But what does that even look like? And for a music consuming generation, a younger one, does that even MTV have any relevance at all?
Right. Yeah, I think MTV looks a lot like YouTube at that point. Vivo,
I guess
on YouTube.
I'm not the right demo for this question, right? But I'm also not the right demo to be on TikTok. But I am on TikTok a little bit, okay? And there's one thing that I've seen. There's a couple of genres. There's some kite surfing stuff, etc. But there's one thing that has blown me away. It's an old school producer I think his name is like Brian Keto or something. I don't even know his name. There's a few things. He's an old school producer with all the guitars. And to your point, he's like, it's like a podcast version of Behind the Music. It's pretty insane, right? And it's really good programming. He'll go on, like, he'll have these artists and do this, that, and the other. And then there's another guy also who is like just a fan of drummers and Neil Peart. And he's found this other dude, Estepario or whatever, and the talent is through the roof. And I find myself watching videos where the top guy is going like this, literally like me. He's like, that was a gravity blast. What is he even doing? The precision, right? And I'm watching him on the bottom and I'm scrolling endlessly. So if they can do this right and be clever about it and be like, hey, TikTok folks, that we funded you or this, that, and the other thing, you're not going to do your thing, your TikTok thing on TV, but here's some money. Here's a studio. Like, go produce something that's meant to be on the big screen instead of a vertical video. So I think there's potential there. I hate to be so bullish on this, capitalistic play, but like kind of think they have a shot at being successful.
Well, it doesn't have to cost a lot. So that's important, because if it's part of this is what are your cost structures, right? So if you're doing it for cable in this era, as opposed to cable in 2002 when it ruled the universe, MTV in 1996 owned the music business, right? So you can't do it at that level. But maybe there's something that's somewhere between YouTube and cable of the last 5 years that becomes really financially sustainable, right?
Especially if you add AI to the mix. I mean, you could start to see some of that taken off. I mean, you have music already. So yeah, it could be. It could be.
Well, the major thing, obviously, is the roll-up of the two big spots and the scale that offers. Do you rebrand HBO Max again? Is that going to happen?
Well, that was unbranding or unrebranding.
Right.
Really, that was originalist branding. So I suspect, and I'll throw this out there, this is an interesting question. Do you just take HBO Max and put Paramount Plus in there because it's smaller? It has good viewership for what it is, but it only has, what does it have? 60 million, 67 million viewers. And last I looked, I think HBO Max is 110 million, something like that. So it's a third bigger. You merge them. I don't know how much overlap, what that Venn diagram looks like, because HBO Max doesn't have any NFL and, Paramount Plus does, and Star Trek. But, that'd be an interesting branding question. HBO Max Plus. Right.
So what's
that's what
if it's like goes on the trajectory right now, just not like exact, but how many tens of billions does Larry Ellison pay for this?
Well, I think look, what did I see at 23.50, which was the third offer? I think that put the price around 55 billion, but that doesn't include 34 billion in debt. Oh, it's enterprise value's big.
What did AT&T pay for Time Warner? Do you recall?
70. Oh, no. AT&T bought Time Warner for, I have this somewhere. I think they bought it for something like 58 billion.
So
and then the spinoff was 40 billion.
The box office and everything, and it's like still, I mean, adjusting for inflation, there's a difference, but still, it's kind of in the ballpark. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the real thing that's, I think, of note, and I wrote a piece about this for Forbes, kind of saying, sending my heart out to all the Warner employees who are going through yet another set of dumbass ideas and combinations and layoffs and distractions and restructurings. That, Merry stinking Christmas to you guys. But, this century alone, the Time Warner AOL deal was announced 3 weeks into 2000. And that is generally considered the worst deal in the history of corporate mergers. AT&T buys, after all that happens, Jeff Bewkes and Richard Parsons took time tearing apart the mess that was created from that, getting rid of AOL, getting rid of Time Warner Cable, getting rid of...
Their job. The guy who cast Luca out of Dallas he's on the unemployment line, but these guys go on.
These guys go on. So, but they had that terrible, the worst ever in modern American capitalism deal. And then fast forward to AT&T saying, hey, we're going to be in connectivity. So we're going to spend a lot of money on DirecTV and a lot more money on Warner Media, Time Warner. And we're going to have all of this stuff and all these ways to send out entertainment to put in the pipes. And it's going to be great. And then they found out $170 billion in debt. Not a great idea. So right
But I
after
will say
John
Michael
Stanky,
Stevenson, who had his hand not just in that deal, ill-fated, but also DirecTV, is now CEO of the fucking company.
No. Well, John Stanky, who ran things,
That's
Right. John Stanky.
Stanky's the guy who did the
with it.
deal.
Who went along with it? He's responsible too.
Yeah,
I hold
Stanky
him
then got
responsible.
elevated to CEO.
Yeah.
And
That's
3 years later said, let's gets a phone call on the golf course, I think, from Zaslav saying, hey, let's combine our over-leveraged, undersized, essentially threatened collection of reality TV networks with your crown jewel of a movie studio and stuff and see what happens. And then $55 billion in debt later. Now, they carved off $20 billion, great, but at what cost? And now they're undoing that deal, whether they sell it all to somebody else or they do what Zaslav was talking about, which was basically undoing the merger.
Is Warner Brothers the subject of the most wealth destruction in the history of the media business?
I think that is a good question. That it's hard to think of anybody in entertainment, certainly, that's up there. But like companies like GE, from which Zaslav was birthed,
Well, sure,
bought up a lot of companies, ripped them up, chainsawed them out. Old Jack Welch, Six Sigma, blah blah blah. Tore up a lot of stuff. Didn't always work. The leveraged buyouts of the 80s and 90s. A lot of that was just loading companies up with debt, strip mining them for assets, and then setting what was left of the ship on fire.
We use the word strip mining. I'm going to talk about a business that both Brian and I bore witness to. Laura Martin talked about it. And I think you might have talked about, because I heard this somewhere else earlier in the month, and it might have been from you, David. I don't remember. CuriosityStream, which has like 25,000 subscribers. Revenue last year was 51 million. It's not a big company, a tiny piece of Netflix. If it was CuriosityStreams together and stacking them, you'd probably need a couple hundred to match Netflix. So it's a small company, but they're going to transform the video business. What they've done is taken their intellectual property of nature shows and science documentaries, which they own 100% outright, and license them to large language models for AI learning. They've partnered with 9 so far. They're in negotiations with 7 others. Not only are they brokering about 3,000 hours of their own content, they're also licensing in the same deal third-party content, about 1.7 million hours, and growing. In Laura Martin's words, you step into their deal and you revenue share 50%. So that's just like free money. They're printing money, basically. So they reported for the third quarter $18.2 million in revenue, which was up 41% year over year. So
I just want to say, Daniel, think how much money they will get to train large language models in AI with episodes unaired of Joey. That could be huge.
There's 46 of them, so that's got to be worth something.
Oh my God. The gold mine waiting to be tapped. Heavens to bet.
It is. Yeah.
My affections are
the whole deal.
Niche series that only I appreciate, but that won't last for much longer. Anyway, the caveat is you have to own your IP outright 100%, but call them up and make money. To Laura Martin's thinking that if you don't do this in the next year, you'll be competitively left in the sand. So
yeah. It's interesting, too, because the studios have been very loath to let their assets be used that way. But this does become a way to incrementally drive revenue that otherwise they're not able to achieve. And actually, because one of the questions has been by people like Rich Greenfield. He says, look, just buying more old IP doesn't make you competitive with Netflix. Using the IP you have and creating new IP makes you more valuable. I mean, And if you're busy consuming another giant studio and restructuring and laying people off and trying to figure out where is Joey in our archive, you are not actually building a business that's competitive. You're just making more old IP doesn't make you better, except selling it to large language models.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's actually a reasonable way to make money off of it. Otherwise, you just have more old IP that some people will care about and will spend a Friday night with their spouse watching on YouTube. And other stuff is just stuff that you got to figure out what you're going to do with. So it's a really interesting question. So this is actually a use case for all that stuff sitting on your digital shelves.
It is. I mean, it's interesting in a number of different dimensions. I will say, to your point about the major Hollywood players, music players, et cetera, et cetera. Well, music, they did a deal with AI, right? And they have these studio aggregators. But there's so many individual talents that have individual representation against individual laws, I think, that it does make it really hard for those larger studios. Lionsgate famously also did one of these types of deals where you can train the library. And that was with Runway. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I mean, what's funny about that too is like the flip side, just to let you guys, I mean, you may have heard a company called Scale AI. You may have heard a company called Turing. There are these companies that are out there plunking down hundreds of millions of dollars for what? For reinforcement learning with humans, right? So you can go right now and look up Turing and they're like, well, they're looking for a PhD in XYZ for $50 an hour. And they're going to have them like write and train, right? There's immense amount going to both things like training with the studios or whatever, but also just manually human reinforcement learning, all of which brings me to my hottest take. This is the earliest I've ever said anything like this. This may or may not happen. This is a huge, bold stake, which is that there are these 7 or 8 model companies. I kind of think it's possible that one of the big stories of the next year is going to be like, yeah, everyone was saying those guys, those chat GPT, those kids that didn't know what the F they're doing, they actually may be ruining their model. I've had a very difficult time with it. And then I look at Gemini and Google 3, what they released, and it's like, wow, yeah, they've been building up that like the human capital over there. I live in this area. I know all these geniuses that these guys have been hiring all these years, and they've been safe about, in deep mind. And now it may be that, we may see some of these AI guys just totally implode because they cannot be trusted. So
Well,
that's my kind of hot take.
they'll implode possibly because there's only room for so many of them, and they're all trying to do it. This is so early in this time, and some of them are way out over their skis financially. We're starting to see debt even by the big guys like OpenAI. But it is true that Alphabet has been plugging along. It was getting hammered by the markets early in the years, like, they're behind and search is going to go away and they're not going to make any money. It's all going to be AI search instead. And now it actually passed Microsoft this week in market value, market cap, which is kind of shocking.
It was a
Sam saved Google. Sam saved Google because it was clear when you first started these, you're like, well, what does it do? Well, I used to have to search on Google for 2 hours and it just gave me an answer. I was like, so like that first reaction is like, oh my God, Google's going to lose their monopoly. Sam comes in, OpenAI, and now it's like they're in danger, I think, of losing that, and Google kind of like retaking the mantle. So it's super.
It's certainly a good bet these days. It's turned suddenly hot, just like Apple. Like in October, we went right. They sell a whole bunch of iPhones, a whole bunch of iPhones. They're doing okay. Maybe they're not going to just disappear.
I bet, guys, I want to turn back if I could do one thing, focus a little bit back on this idea of like, what are we going to do with Paramount, Warner Bros? Like, what would they do? What are the Ellisons going to do if they have all of this stuff, right?
Right. What do you keep or what do you get rid of? Because not everything stays.
And how do you slice and dice? And I think if you look at the HBO thing, the error, let's say, right? I think what you miss, like what they missed, is that we're actually not one big thing. There's a bunch of little clusters of demand all over the place, right? And we're now at a point where we kind of are unbundled a little bit. Not to say the bundle's going away, but like one set bundle kind of is going away. And I want to bring it back a little bit to Liz Reemersma, of Sling VP.
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
I sympathize.
She's fantastic. And we talked, I think it was the next day that the news broke, we talked about the daily passes. And it is very compelling, that idea that you can have a daily pass. And I think it was this week that a court said, yeah, you can't stop them from having a daily pass. So that's kind of another thing. It didn't necessarily happen on.
That's an antitrust thing.
Yeah,
right?
Disney tried to stop them. It was Disney.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that's
of course.
huge. I think that's huge. Huge. Right. And
yeah,
then what it
Disney's
says
all
is
about,
back
you
to
gotta buy all of it. You got to buy it every month, and you can't like not take part of it.
Which
Right?
means going back to the other thing, if they're too ambitious, like we need scale, guys, and it's going to be one thing, and they don't realize that, wait a second, what we need is scale, but you have to build it block by block. So HBO is going to be this block, and P Plus going to be that block. Do you know what I mean? I feel like they do have to kind of pull it together and allow a little bit of, that P Plus is where you go for the multi-view on the sports, and this one, maybe you go here for like a little bit of that segmentation of the audience. I think is going to serve them well, because there are going to be brands like BritBox and right, like these brands. Back to my core point of what Dallas Lawrence of Telly was saying, like the habits are real. My wife is really addicted to BritBox. Period. Just the way she is with her iPhone. And I think the more you kind of recognize that, the more you realize, like, yeah, I got to play with these new little apps and figure it out. So I think that is their big challenge, is like, how are they going to be 15 blocks, but it can't just be one. It's got to be somewhere in the middle there.
Right. So they're going to buy a whole bunch of audiences for different stuff, like Bill Maher, one of Dan's favorites, or
just looking at some of our favorites in the newsletter and our time. Maybe we should. What else do we got?
I do want to touch on, because we all three had disappointing weekends for our favorite teams in college football. But one of the surprising things that we saw, I mean, the Big Ten had a bad week. So Tony Petitti, the commissioner, was trying to get the SEC to agree with him to try to force through an expanded college football playoff process that had 16 or even 24 teams with 4 guaranteed slots for the Big Ten and the SEC. The SEC isn't going along with that, because they actually think some years they might do better, and this would just get in the way. So that was a loss. Then he tried to push through a $2 billion plus private equity package that would inject capital into all of the schools in the Big Ten.
Even Michigan pushed back. Yeah.
USC and Michigan not only pushed back, Michigan said, screw you, we will leave and go independent. Michigan, one of the most storied programs in the history of college football, said, we are not doing that. Part of it was because they would have to extend their TV grant of rights into the 2040s. And I just try to imagine what TV looks like in 2045. I can't get there 20 years from now. And I think they couldn't either. So we are not going to lock ourselves up for 2 decades on this one. Sorry. So they lost there. And then 3, Sports Illustrated did a little list looking at Nielsen and said, here are the top 20 most watched college football programs. First 6 are in the SEC. 13 of the 20 are in the SEC. USC, as in University of Southern California, is not. The University of Southern California is not, but the University of South Carolina is, because it's in the SEC. They have better matchups. Dan Lanning was grumping this weekend, the Oregon coach, that, we don't play Chattanooga State. It's like, yeah, but you have a bunch of crappy games like Rutgers and Ohio State. You got a bunch of not very successful programs. So it's interesting to look at, are they getting their money's worth with that Big Ten, those Big Ten TV deals that Fox and CBS and NBC did?
There was a really interesting story written by Stuart Mandel, college football writer, back in the still kind of halcyon days of Sports Illustrated. He just covered this game between USC and Cal at the Coliseum. This was when Aaron Rodgers was at Cal. He completed like 23 straight passes. Somehow Pete Carroll engineers a defense that stops him at the 7-yard line with 4 tries at the end. Great game. It kind of determined the national championship. USC were both great that year. USC went on to win it. But after this like kind of historic and overlooked game, everybody all the fans are finally out of the Coliseum talking about what play they're going to see or what they're going to do that night. And there's no real kind of the fans have so many options, and college football just doesn't occupy the same place in their lives as it does a mid-market game in the SEC has 5 times the engagement. At the time, I kind of didn't know what he was talking about, but I sure do now. I mean, maybe pro sports like the Dodgers or the Lakers will capture the imagination, but I don't know if college sports will ever
Well,
be.
so I mean, yeah, this is an emotional topic, honestly, right? Like, actually, the breakup of the Pac-12, the realignment, and as often happens in my life, it's like I kind of lamented all that. Oh, I don't know if this is the right thing, and it's like at the end of the day, what the kind of they wanted to happen or whatever is happening. The big football schools, by the way, have all gotten better academically. A lot of the kids want to go to schools I never even heard of. I really miss not playing SC. I really miss not playing UCLA. I miss the Winnebagos back and forth. The kids are flying to the East Coast. They can't. Who the hell wants to be on a 5-hour flight like that? And yet, it's like it's working, right? Like the TV's better. It's the playoffs. We're all gonna right, and it's like I don't mean to be like. There's nothing to
But
do about it,
Brian,
I guess. But
I think the argument here is that national conference, which is the Big Ten, with 4 teams on the West Coast, Rutgers and Maryland on the East Coast, none of which have natural regular season rivalries with any of the core Big Ten teams, is a very different thing. Even Nebraska doesn't kind of go with the others. But the SEC, when it added Missouri and Texas A&M and Oklahoma and Texas, which were on the periphery of their territory in areas where those schools already recruited, particularly Texas, man. And so it was just extending its reach next door. And you could still do the Winnebago ride. I mean, the run from Columbia, Missouri to Columbia, South Carolina isn't that bad, as opposed to here, you go to the USC Iowa game, every Iowan from here to Salt Lake City showed up at the game despite the rain last week, but that's not a natural.
correct. How many years running? It's the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, Michigan last year at USC, huge turnout. Penn State, huge turnout. Yeah, I'm sorry, Penn State last year, amazing amount of Penn State alums showed up. But those aren't natural. And that's what college football lives off of. And that's what college football viewership probably feeds on. So I don't know that this national strategy that they have is really paying off in terms of.
Not for everybody, certainly not if they're a UC affiliated school.
Right.
No.
I mean, we haven't talked about also the transfer portal. And I have a lot of fun jokes around that because we had a quarterback that bailed on us, now apparently a Heisman candidate. But
no, he's like number one.
He refused to play our bowl game.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And as soon as he left, the thing is that I find funny is as soon as he left, we have the Saga Politelli now, who's pretty good, but like literally within a game, they're like, oh, he's going to go to the transfer. It's a joke amongst my friends. Like you can't have some some like one moderately good game and all of a sudden you're like threatening to go I think the transfer portal is a little bit of a problem. I mean, I just don't see how that fosters good fandom.
Well, it'll keep evolving. I have to say that I am not opposed to players being able to leave in an orderly fashion when coaches can leave and get paid tens of millions of dollars. Either they're fired or they just jump to the next thing and they buy themselves out or whatever. If the coaches can leave, the players should be able to leave. This is not indentured servitude. So I'm okay with the transfer portal, even if we could tweak when it takes effect and things like that.
Well, similar with NIL. You probably have a similar money on that. Yeah. I mean,
again, the players are the ones generating tens of billions of dollars in value. They should get a share of that. So,
right. And I'm not arguing that side, right? I mean, obviously that's a really tough side to argue, but it does sort of feed in. I mean, a little bit of my head's like, well, why don't we just like call it what it is? And these are our quasi-professional college students or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's where we're headed.
Yeah. Anyway, well, this seems like probably a good place to leave it as college football enters its very last weekends. Thanksgiving is just ahead, despite Dan's disdain for the cross-aisle entreaties of Bill Maher, the short-statured, 5'5" statured, as he put it, the hulking Daniel looks down upon Bill Maher.
Choose a side. Choose a side, as is what I'm saying.
No, why do you have to choose a side?
He's trying to make that point, you got to meet with the other side.
You got to meet
No,
with the other
he's
side.
saying
Our whole political system is built on meeting
he
with the
was
other side. I hate to say it.
a committed lefty all through Trump 1. And then he comes out and says, I can't do that act again, so I'm going to vary up my act. That's all I'm saying. And he's got John Malone at the very top, probably sending him directives. It looks staged to me. The authenticity is very questionable.
I will say, okay, let me just say one thing in his defense on this very point. Did you see this last week's episode at all?
I
He kind of made a point about like he's going to have new owners in the new year, and to his credit, like the episode, I don't think is going to make his new owners very happy. It's like,
no, it's not. I mean, he had Donna Brazile and Donna Brazile, who was flirting with him shamelessly again in very entertaining fashion.
Mike, Killer Mike.
Killer Mike. Killer Mike, right.
Not that there's
both of whom pretty committed lefties. No doubt about that. So.
Exactly. I thought that was kind of funny. But listen, I do want to say, even though I kind of love him as a talent, I do he gets tiring. He's old. He's got all kinds of shticks that are too much. So it's not unconditional, Daniel. I agree with you.
No, it's not unconditional, but who are we unconditional about? That's something for the next episode. Ponder that. In the meantime, I'm David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT, and this here podcast, Next TMT Talks, with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. We are delighted to have had Brian Ring from the future of TV.live, on whose podcast I also appear quarterly sometimes. Happy to do that. Thank you, Brian, so much for joining us. You can subscribe to Next TMT at nexttmt.com for free. Comes every week, loaded with data and snarky comments about our respective weirdnesses.
Not snarky. I had somebody, well, I won't get into it, call us snarky. Snarky is kind of flippant comment in the absence of absolute facts and information.
We have opinions as well as facts, and we try to couch the opinions in facts, which I realize makes us look very old school. But nonetheless, there is some pleasure along with the medicine that we serve up of data, hard facts. And for that, I do hope you will join us this and every week with that. Happy Thanksgiving to all. Try to talk to your weird uncle, not too much, but just understand you don't know what's going on inside of his head either, no matter how much he shares. And with that, thank you all, and to all a good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.